Welcome to another episode of Search News You Can Use with me, Gabe.
And me, Dr. Marie Haynes. I'm so excited for this episode. Glenn and I have known each other for a very long time, and today we're going to talk about assessing traffic drops in Google traffic. So welcome, Glenn, and thank you for coming to the podcast.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm really excited to be here. I listen to the podcast religiously, so it's kind of surreal to be on it. It's cool.
Oh, that's really cool. Glenn, why don't you introduce yourself and tell the audience what it is you do and just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name's Gabe. I run my own consulting business, G Squared Interactive, where I heavily focus on helping companies that have experienced a traffic drop. A lot of times it's focused on Broadcore updates, but it could be anything. I have a lot of things across my desk that are weird drops, So it could be from manual actions. It could be just weird algorithmic blips. It could be from Broadcore updates or other things. So that's pretty much what I'm neck deep in.
When did you first start doing traffic drop assessments?
Yeah, pretty much since I started in SEO, which was a really, really long time ago. So this is sites I was either helping them internally, like being at a company or at an agency, and then companies would reach out and just be like, we saw this weird drop, and I just from the beginning was like super loved digging in and being like a detective around trying to figure out what was going on. The more you learn about SEO and the more Google shares and the more they shared about their updates, you start to get a feel for what's going on. And then Panda and Penguin hit, and there was more about what was going on. And that's really, I'd say I was doing it a lot, probably in the 2008 and on area. And then with Panda, it really hit. And from that point on, it's like 99% of what I focus on.
Right. Yeah. So 2008 is when I started in SEO, although I didn't really get into the excitement of what Google algorithms do and until Panda and Penguin. And I remember my very first client call was with a Penguin hit site. And this guy would not stop going on about this Gabe guy. And we'll have to reminisce off air about who the client was. But I remember he had been working with, every person he could. And all he could talk about was just how amazing Gabe was at figuring out Penguin. So that was my first introduction to you, Glenn. I read everything you wrote about Penguin. And then, I think we threw theories back and forth sometimes.
Yes. I remember you commented, I believe, on one of my posts, or I believe that's the first time I had seen you. And I was like, she's really smart. Like, she's asking some really good questions. And then, obviously you went down that path heavily and you became probably the industry leader in that area. So, so I think that was the first time that I saw your comments and stuff like that. So.
Neat. And that was like 10 years ago. So
I know.
Well, can you believe it's 10 years coming up that Penguin ran?
I know. I always look back to that first blog post I wrote about it after Penguin 1.0. And I'm like, it's wild to see how far things have come and see where that has gone. And then where medieval Panda was, and now it's not. And now Broadcore updates. And, it's really interesting. But I remember, there was a company that contacted me. I want to say it was like 2006 or 2007 who got hammered. And so that was probably one of the first that I dug into, that you could see the site broadly was impacted. They lost 80% of their traffic algorithmically overnight. So it's been really interesting to see that path, like you have too, since Penguin and Panda, and now quality updates and then Broadcore updates and so on and so forth. So.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to talk about an article that you wrote a couple of months ago now, because we've been trying to have this talk for a couple of months, and things have come up on either side here. But an article about Broadcore updates and how you assess the traffic drops. And so we're going to get into that. I have some questions about the article. Before we do have a sponsor for this episode. And so I'm just going to read out our sponsorship here. When you live and breathe SEO, creating content is half the battle. There's always a trade-off between quality and volume, and finding good writers can be a major headache. So our sponsor this week is Contentfly. Contentfly makes it easy to request content with and connect with writers without compromising on quality. Simply sign up, fill out your goals, submit your brief, and they'll take care of the rest. Content Fly's custom matching process ensures you find the perfect writers for your content goals. They even include free revisions and rewrites, plagiarism checks, and a 30-day, 4,000-word money-back guarantee. So you can get started. If you are a listener of Search News, you can go to contentfly.com/search news, and there is an offer there for you. Okay, and this episode of Search News You Can Use corresponds with our newsletter, which is episode number 230. You can find that at mariehaynes.com/newsletter. There's lots of stuff, Glenn. We probably could have talked about the whole newsletter instead of your article, because lots went on with the product reviews update. Has now finished rolling out as of April 11th. What was your experience with this rollout of the product reviews update?
Yeah, so I heavily focused on analyzing the first and the second. I have 2 posts about that are, like 3,000 words plus each. So it's very interesting to go through this one. I'm still digging in heavily, and I probably will write a post about it or specific things about it that I'm seeing. Listen, Google's evolving and it's really trying to get better at it. There were definitely loopholes with the second, which I clearly communicated in what I was seeing. Some of those have been closed, which is good. Some of those, by the way, were closed even before the PRU, the latest, which was interesting. So might have been part of like a smaller Broadcore update, a smaller core update, I should say. But anyway, so I would say overall things are good, right? I mean, I think that they're trying to surface the best quality content that they can, but there are examples of that not happening. And some weird stuff going on again with dueling machine learning algorithms with core updates, a site surging or dropping, and the opposite with the product reviews update, which I think personally is a major problem with Google. You can't have that happening. You have 2 basically big updates doing different things with the site. So it's interesting. I mean, again, I'll be writing a post probably about it. We could probably talk the whole hour about
exactly. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to decide here how much to talk on, because I feel like if we talk on product reviews, we'll end up on that for the rest of the talk. We did, for those who are listening, I have done some conversation on product review updates. You can look back in our past podcast episodes, and Glenn has written a lot as well. What we found, I found it was really interesting because this third rollout, we actually had several clients with really nice gains, which the first 2 rollouts, we didn't really see any impact at all. And the sites that were seeing gains were smaller affiliate type sites that really did have good review content. A lot of pages for queries where people were asking for the best on something. So if you did a search for best running shoes for whatever, and definitely you could see that the content was being elevated, or that was being elevated was the type of content that Google wrote about in their recommendations.
Yeah. I think overall I would agree with you, but I have so many examples of really bad stuff just ranking. And I'll get into it more in the post probably, but I think it's more of that there's just not a lot of great content for that area. Do you know what I mean? So it's not like Google could put something better there. It's just all not great that's ranking for those specific queries. And the other thing that's interesting is I saw collateral damage in the second one, especially in the first as well. This one, not as much, meaning like I think Google's getting better at saying this is a product review page or site or section versus, some other type of site that ran. Like I had some companies reach out to me and be like, we surged, and they're like, not a product review site. I'm like, what? Yeah. Or clients where certain areas within their site either dropped or surged, and they totally had nothing to do with product reviews. So I think Google's getting better there, but it's a machine learning system. So with any of that, as we've seen with Broadcore updates, they sometimes need to keep refining what they're doing there to get it right.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they've got a lot more coming. I mean, Google has been so focused on making sure that we produce good, helpful product pages. I have all sorts of theories on where Google wants to go with, we just saw there's something in the newsletter this week that there's this multi-search now that we can search with. Go ahead, Glenn, tell us about multi-search.
Oh, no, I was going to say I've been testing it heavily. And so it's really cool. Like, for example, what I shared on Twitter was there was I was at a distillery near us, and I took a cool picture of one of the drinks that they made. And I did it and then swiped up and added recipe. And boom, it gave me recipes for all the, I mean, it's really cool stuff. The problem is that nobody knows about it. So multiple times I'll go to people outside of SEO and go, do you know how to use Lens? Forget about multi-search. They're going to have no idea what I'm talking about. Do you know how to use Lens? Oh, I kind of see it. Maybe did it a few times. And then I show them how to use Lens first of all, and they're blown away. And then multi-search with Lens, and they're like, this is amazing. I think Google's big challenge is how do you get people to use that?
I think if they can, though, it's going to be massive. I mean, last year you shared a piece of content from the New York Times. It was just before the summer, and you said something about, oh, this is a great example of great content, and it was something about gardening.
Yes.
And there was a picture in the content of these concrete blocks that you could put in the garden and then lay wood on either side. And I was like, man, that's exactly what I need. Now, Lens and multi-search wasn't around then, but at the time, so what I had to do was do a whole bunch of Google searches for like concrete blocks for like, how do you even describe them, right? Whereas now I could just open up Lens on Chrome even too now, right? Click on that image. And I don't know if it does it yet, but I know Google's hope is that Google can show me where I could buy those online, you know?
Well, I actually tested that. So I took a photo, it was like of a dress or something like that, or shorts or whatever. And then I put in with multi-search buy. And I'm pretty sure it gave me all the e-commerce sites that I can buy it at, or, you know, relatively speaking. And I mean, it's really powerful. But again, and I have 2 kids that are teenagers, right? One that's going off to college next year. And they really had no idea what I was talking about with Lens. And that's shocking, right? These are kids that are neck deep in TikTok and Snapchat, and they understand AR filters and everything like that. But when I showed them it, they were both like, this is really cool. But they didn't know, you know what I mean? So like the average person, I really hope Google does something, but I don't even know what they could do other than prompts in the search results, which they may start doing, right? And I don't know if you saw this, but I shared it the other day. I went through a whole survey after using multi-search. So Google's already gaining tons of feedback. I didn't see that. And it wasn't just like, is this good? It was asking me what I put in, what I was looking for, blah, blah, blah. So, so that's really interesting too. They're definitely, you know, hoping to gain some feedback so they could refine it. And if they could expand that, amazing. Again, I mean, Lens is killer. My wife was the same way. I showed her how to use Lens. She's like, this is amazing, but she didn't know about it. Even though it's right in the search bar now. Like there's a Lens.
It's not just on your phone, on your camera. It's like in Chrome on your desktop, which I think a lot of people don't realize.
So anyway, it's cool.
Yeah. Well, so we've got lots of other stuff in newsletter, some stuff on, Daniel Weisberg tweeted this really cool bubble chart that you can make with Search Console data and looking at queries that perhaps don't have click-through rate or have good click-through rate, but maybe aren't ranking optimally. And that's something I think was really, really cool. And lots of other stuff. So let's get on to this article. We'll link to the article in our show notes so anybody who's listening can follow along if you want to do that. And Glenn, you talked about 3 things that you assess when there is a site that has a traffic drop: relevancy shifts, intent shifts, and then overall site quality. Why don't we go through each of those just briefly, and you can kind of explain the different ways that sites can be affected.
Sure. So like a lot of my blog posts, this comes out of talking with 1 million clients, you know, so anytime I get the same question over and over and over, I'm like, I should just write a blog post about it so I can point people to it. But so basically, whenever a site sees a big drop in traffic from a Broadcore update, a smaller core update, whatever it may be, my big question always is, should it have dropped, right? Is it okay? And, you know, it confuses a lot of site owners, especially as you see maybe a drop in revenue, maybe you don't know what's going on. So the real 3 buckets that everything kind of fits into, a relevancy adjustment is basically Google just not deeming your content relevant anymore for the query. Sometimes that's totally right. Other times it's not. Maybe you should have never ranked there in the first place. Or you have older content that just isn't relevant anymore. And I'll get into some examples of that. Then you have intent shifts, right? So intent shifts are tougher because that's Google saying that we're going to rank a different type of site for this query. And that's, I'm helping some clients right now that have gone through that. And I'll explain more about that, some of the things going on there. But that could actually reverse itself, right? So as Google kind of figures out, oh, we went too far, maybe they come back slightly, or even sometimes a complete reversal of that. So that's a tough situation, because if that sticks, there's really nothing you could do about that, other than focus on the other intent that may be ranking, but it doesn't mean Google's going to rank your site there for that. And then you have, if it's not one of those two, and if you're dropping in rankings for queries that you should rank for, and that you have content that you should rank for, or that you think you should rank for, then it could be overall site quality issues, which I know you've done a lot of work in as well. And that can be a lot of different things. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, later on. But that's where you basically have to, objectively evaluate your site on multiple levels, not just content, and try and figure out everything that potentially could be dragging the site down. And in my opinion, try and fix as much of it as possible, especially since we're in a machine learning environment, right? So it's not like, hey, here's the one smoking gun, never going to be that most of the time. I mean, sometimes there could be a really big problem. But to me, whenever you see a Broadcore update and it's due to quality, it's due to a number of things that are impacting the site.
It's been a while since I had a smoking gun type of audit.
Right.
Yourself as well? Yeah.
Totally.
I mean, they used to happen.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of example. I mean, I've had cases where people have really struggled with indexing, and then it turns out there's a no index tag on the page or something. Those are the fun ones.
Yeah, technical, you could have a smoking gun. Like, for example, if you basically had a glitch and Googlebot is seeing no content, right? Like, there's nothing in the HTML that Google's seeing, but it's showing up on the page when people visit it, you could have a big problem, or a no index, or robots.txt directive. But usually, I mean, if it's during a Broadcore update, the hard part is that clients need to understand there's a lot to fix usually, and a lot to improve. The good news is that that's something, unlike intent shifts, where you can actually control part of this.
Yes.
It's just you need to take a leap of faith and go, all right, we're going to fix a lot, and hope that we come back, and knowing that you probably will if you significantly improve quality over the long term, but it's probably not going to happen in a month.
Exactly. Yeah. We don't see those quick recoveries anymore. And when it is a quality issue, like I said, we'll get into some of those examples. Like it's often very difficult to pinpoint the exact issue. We'll often point out like 50 different things that could be contributing to quality. And then it's, we have to prioritize, well, some of these are fixable, and some of them, I mean, one of the things that we're seeing a lot lately is just bad content that used to rank on maybe SEO power, sites that knew how to get links in ways that, maybe weren't completely natural. And, now that Google's able to do a little bit more with actually assessing content, those are hard to fix if you have, tens of thousands or millions of pages that really aren't the best of their kind.
Totally.
Yeah.
That will add up and bite you. It's like at some point. So.
Before we get into, so I want to get into each of these in more detail, the relevancy and intent shifts and quality. Tell me a little bit more about Delta reports.
Yeah. So again, this is something that I don't know if you know this or not, but I used to call Panda reports, right?
Yes.
So
I know, because I did them. Yeah. I remember sitting with I remember sitting on my couch when my youngest was a young baby, and I had her on one side and Glenn Gabe's post on the other, and, trying to figure out what keywords dropped and what parts of my site dropped. And I'm well familiar.
Awesome. Yeah. So I called it a Panda report because I found it extremely helpful when a site got crushed by Panda, losing 60-70% of its traffic, like, could happen during old Panda updates, and saying, all right, well, let me see what dropped query wise and what dropped landing page wise. And normally when you see those during Panda, when you see those big drops and follow the query and landing page, sometimes it yielded amazing findings, right? Like, whoa, horrible ad situation, or really thin content, or just didn't meet user expectations, whatever it may be. So that's what Delta reports do. And I've been able to automate that numerous ways by using Analytics Edge, which is what I use in all of those posts. So you could use other tools if you want to, but it's a great way to go. And so it's basically isolating the queries and landing pages that drop the most during whatever happened, was a Broadcore update or whatever.
Yeah, and that post that you have on using Analytics Edge and other tools to make this
Yeah,
Delta report, that's something that my team has been working with, and we've put together some really exciting things. We've only done a couple of reports so far, but each time we've done it, it's been so cool to look at the data and go, oh, we thought there were quality issues, but actually, like, it was this,
right,
and
right.
and that there's times where we've had sites that have wanted to go ahead with, a massive, thorough audit to improve quality, which is never a bad idea. There's always something you can improve on.
Sure.
But it turns out that Google had a different understanding of intent. And so, changing the quality of those pages would not meet the user intent in these cases. And so that can be really
Right.
helpful.
And you bring up a great point. The quality thing is one thing, but also Delta reports highlight relevancy adjustments and intent shifts, right? So,
Mhm.
I just did this for a company that saw a big intent shift in the country that they're in for what they want to rank for. And, the Delta report, it was just like so easy to see. I mean, massive drops for these queries that they have good content for. They're just now off of page one, and
Wow.
who's on page one now, or different types of sites that Google's now thinking that they should rank. So it Delta reports, to me, I always say it in my blog post about major algorithm updates, first thing you should do,
Mhm.
right? Just
Mhm.
understand what dropped and then dig in from there. And you're
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Sometimes with companies, you have to go, listen, there's not much I could really do here. It's like, sure, I could analyze your site and you could, like you said, always improve something, but sometimes it's not that, so Delta
Mhm.
reports are a great way to start.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for everything you've written on, like, how to do it. I think I think a lot of people think that it's way more complicated than it is, looking at the actual data. So I really encourage others to check it out. It's not that expensive to use Analytics Edge.
Oh,
Um,
no, not
yeah,
at
yeah.
all. Yeah.
And so I think it's something that most of us should be doing if we're trying to analyze a traffic drop, rather than I think a lot of people just jump right into, all right, let's do a technical audit, where that could be a component of it. Uh, but let's talk about, okay, relevancy. Do you have an example of a type of site that was affected where you thought relevancy was the issue?
Yeah, so let me just go to my list. I think an easy one for people to understand are basically major news publishers or that focus on a specific niche, right? So imagine you wrote about celebrities, right? And you were ranking for a celebrity name, so a head term, Brad Pitt, whatever it may be. And that article was 3 years ago, and you were still ranking,
Mhm.
page one, maybe number three for the name, and a Broadcore update rolls through and you drop to page three, four, five, or beyond. That's a great example of a relevancy adjustment. And it's right.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
unless that's something still relevant to that person, it's probably not. And Google's like, all right, we're going to surface something else. So I see that all the time because I help a lot of news publishers and some focused on that niche. But another type of news publisher where they have a lot of like financial data, information on companies. You could see during Broadcore updates, it's just the way the world that they have to live in, which is Broadcore updates roll through, and some of these things are just not relevant anymore, and they
Yep.
get it, and they know that they're going to have new content coming in that will rank, so it's not that big of a deal. But those are two really good examples of relevancy
That's
adjustments.
good. Yeah. How much
Then,
do
oh yeah, go
you
ahead.
recommend how often are you recommending going back and updating content? So, that would be a perfect example, right?
Totally, totally. So all the time I talk about the power of that, right? Because the more you can improve your content over time, especially if you're adding new things that are going on, now you can rank for those new queries as well as just also meeting or exceeding user expectations, which I think is massively important. It's
Mhm.
exactly what Google's trying to do. So if you have content that's kind of just fallen by the wayside, doesn't really meet or exceed user expectations anymore, it's older, whatever, it's a great idea to go back in and to do that. Now, for a lot of sites, especially the ones I'm helping that are larger, that's not easy, right? I mean, you're
Mhm.
talking
Mhm.
hundreds of thousands of pages, if not millions of pages. The site I spoke about before with the financial piece, they have 2 to 3 million pages indexed.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
not easy for their team to go in and do anything like that. But you're right. You should be, in my opinion, looking at your top pages that are ranking all the time, maybe monthly, and saying, all right, we're still ranking there. Should we be? Right. So if you had if you have an editorial team or anyone in charge of content, hopefully they're going through and constantly looking at that type of stuff. There
Mhm.
was another example of a relevancy adjustment I wanted to bring up. So it's a site that is in health and medical, in my opinion, one of the top in their vertical. But they were ranking for really broad terms, like one word
Okay.
things that they were top of the rankings. Now, during a Broadcore update, they still rank really well for torso terms, which are the ones that really their articles fit. For the head terms, they fell off the map. So they lost traffic, but they're still ranking really well for the ones that they should. So that's a relevancy adjustment. But in my opinion, and I had to tell them, it's the right thing, in my opinion.
Exactly.
Now, they
Yeah.
want to rank for those head terms, but in reality, that's very, very tough. You know, that would be
And you
like me
wonder,
wanting to rank for just SEO. I mean, yeah, I guess that'd be cool, but does that really help me, you
exactly,
know?
what's the value in,
Right.
if you rank for shoes or, some top, some query that's very
Exactly.
common, you're not likely to convert people with those.
Right.
But it hurts though when you look at the, if you're the SEO who's, depending on how you're measured. We had a
Yep.
client, I don't know if you saw that, plummeted with the product reviews, the latest product reviews update. It was March 23rd, and it was
Yep.
one of the worst traffic drops I've ever seen. And so we reached out to them, and it turns out that it was planned. They had no indexed some content that was just really irrelevant and not the best of its kind.
Yep.
And so it's there's parts to that we need to figure out, because the fact that they dropped so much tells me that maybe
Yeah.
that content was valuable to somebody. But my point is here that sometimes traffic just drops, and you can't always assume that it's because of an update that happened, right? There's
Right.
other things that can happen.
Absolutely. On that note, by the way, I found two sites that dropped, like fell off the map during the product reviews update when everyone else was seeing volatility, and they changed domain names, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
it has
yeah.
nothing to do, but everyone would jump on it and be like, oh, look, they dropped by like 80%. It's like, no, they actually
Yeah.
changed domain names.
Let
But
me test your memory. May 20th, 2014.
oh, Panda 4.0.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Yes, because I know,
Yeah.
because that's also the day that I launched one of my own websites, or
Okay.
relaunched it and forgot my analytics code on it. And so
Right.
so I saw the sudden drop too, and I was like, oh no, it's Panda. And it
Yeah,
wasn't.
and
It
that
was
was a huge update.
mhm,
And I
mhm.
remember we spoke about that when it actually launched. I remember we went back and forth on some things. So yeah, that was a huge update.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
those medieval Panda updates were massive. I mean, the
yeah.
cool part was that they were every like 6 weeks or so, 6 to 8 weeks. But
Mhm.
the crazy part was they were clearly refining that over time. And in the beginning, some sites were just getting obliterated.
Yeah.
That
And
I'm
see,
not
and
so
you and
sure
yeah.
needed to, but
And you and I saw the value then in trying to like analyze all those little blips, because if we could show
yeah,
that it was Panda, so like if you were seeing your sites that were affected by Panda saw changes, and my sites that seemed to be Panda type sites saw changes, it helped us uh, communicate to the rest of the community, like, oh, this looks like it was Panda, so if you were hit, look at this and this. But these days, that type of thing doesn't really happen. So
right.
all these little blips that we have, where the SEMrush sensor will show that
Yeah,
something crazy was going on, it's
right.
been a while since we've looked at those and found anything other than like the same thing that we're talking about right now, right?
I totally agree. And it's almost like, and I just had this conversation with a client, and it's really cool because they got it after a while. In the beginning, they wanted to focus on very specific, smaller things. And I'm like, no, you were impacted by the November Broadcore update, right? And pretty badly. I'm like, and it's this, it's not this, right?
Mhm.
It's like, look at everything. It's not about this technical little detail that really doesn't make a difference, or, it's nice to fix. But, and finally, I got an email from them, and they were like, we get it. It's big. We're looking long term. We're
Mhm.
fixing as much as we can. We're improving this. We're investing in this. And I was like, this is great, because
Mhm.
that's what they need to do. So I'm really eager to see how they do over the next probably 6 to 9 months. Based upon this site, that's probably what it's going to take.
Mhm.
But they do get it, and they're implementing stuff. So yeah,
It's great when we have clients like that that
But
take
it
what we
took a
say, and
while
yeah,
for that, right?
yeah,
Because it
and
was
it yeah.
it initially wanted to focus on very, like a lot of small things that
Mhm.
probably wouldn't have moved the needle. So
Exactly. Yeah. And easy to do things. Like we have people who want
yes,
to, hope that we could file a disavow and reverse everything, which,
right,
maybe 8, 9 years ago, that might have been the case. But
Right.
yeah, it's rare that, like we keep saying, that there's easy ways to recover a site.
Yeah. And your article on that was amazing, by the way. The
On
recent one that you,
Oh, thank you, thank you.
it was
Yeah,
great. And
it's
stuff like that is so important to get published so you can share it with people. You know what I mean? Like
exactly,
I
yes.
know that I think Marketing O'Clock actually put you, do you know that you were the
Mhm,
article of
mhm.
the week? Yeah. So anyway, but that's what needs to happen. More people need to read things like that to truly understand, because you still come across, hey, nothing wrong, and they're disavowing like 10,000 domains. Like, whoa, what are you doing? Like
Yeah,
to
yeah.
really understand when you should and when you shouldn't is super important.
And
You know,
it's difficult
so,
too, because we struggle with it, and like we've done it day in and day out for a decade now, and we still
yep,
sometimes struggle with knowing what to disavow. So,
yep,
how can the average site owner who's only looked at their own
totally.
site do that? It's tricky, but that's why people hire us and you, right?
Yeah,
So,
yep,
yeah. Tell me about. I think we talked a little bit about stale and dated sites. I think you mentioned that
yep.
we can move on there. Intent shifts, a little bit different than relevancy, although very closely tied together. Can you give an example? I think some of the product review stuff was connected to intent shifts, right?
We could start there. That's a great
Mm-hmm.
example. So with the product reviews update, what we saw in December as well. So for head terms that don't include like best, right? Um, if review sites were dominating the SERP, sometimes that switched to now e-commerce retailers, like Google
Okay.
cutting out the review sites and going, people, we think our algorithms believe people want to go directly to Amazon or Walmart or
Mm-hmm.
Target to go and buy it. So that's a big intent shift, because if the review sites were there, they were probably making a good amount of affiliate revenue on people landing there, scanning a list and going and buying, right? And now they're not there. So that's a tough intent shift, because you're not an e-commerce retailer as a
Mm-hmm.
review site, and you're not going to end up ranking for that if Google wants to put them there. The other thing is sometimes a few slots were left open for review sites. So maybe it's like all e-commerce retailers and maybe one or two review sites. So if you were the third in the list, at least from a ranking perspective, you were now page 2 or 3.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's a really good example of an intent shift. What can a site owner really do if you're a best, an affiliate site that's writing about the best type of product, and Google's putting an e-commerce retailer there,
Right, right. And
you
we see
know?
that all the
Yeah,
time too, with like Google deciding that maybe this query people want informational content.
right.
And one of the things that we started seeing a couple years ago was that maybe our client, who was an e-commerce store, ranked at number 3 behind Amazon and Walmart. And now the only e-com that's on page 1 is Amazon, Walmart, and everything else is informational. It's not possible for our client. I shouldn't say it's not possible, because we have had some clients that can break through that sometimes. But if Google has decided that most people want to buy this from Amazon or from some big store, it's going to be very hard to change their opinion of you, unless you start growing more as a business, right? I mean, we had a client who came to us wanting to help with medical types of medical queries, and they wanted to outrank Healthline and Mayo Clinic, and we were like, you guys don't have the authority, and they built authority. I mean, they're not more authoritative than the Mayo Clinic, but for their subject, they're known as that. And now, a couple years later, they compete in those top 3. So it can be done, but it's difficult if Google's decided that the intent is different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you're explaining is a great point. I mean, for informational content, I think you definitely could do that, like you're explaining. The e-commerce part's really hard. If you're like
Mhm.
not selling products, only you just can't just throw up an e-commerce site and suddenly rank for those if Google's going to put them there.
Although,
But
oh,
yeah,
sorry. What do you think about, let's say you have an e-commerce client who lost rankings to some maybe affiliate sites that have done like, oh, the best whatever product of 2022. How do you feel about the e-commerce store themselves writing a best of? I mean, it's hard, right, to write, here's how we compare to this competitor and that competitor, but I've seen people do that. I don't know. I think that could be an option. Tricky
yeah.
though.
I mean, you could always try it, right? And so you're talking about an e-commerce retailer that doesn't have all of the products on the site, but
Yeah.
they sell their own, and then they're listed.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I haven't come across like too many in my research, and I've been going pretty deep in the product
Yeah.
reviews updates. and not really seeing that. But yeah, I mean, you could if it's objectively done, but I haven't seen too
Realistically,
many
though,
of
now that I
those
think
rankings.
about it, if
Yeah,
Google's determined that my intent is to see products from multiple vendors,
yeah,
they're probably not going to show me just the
right.
original
Yeah, I
manufacturer.
mean,
So,
and
yeah,
that's not live yet, that part of the algorithm, but
right,
I've
yeah,
seen that more and more, which is great because I think it is better to actually provide multiple options. But I can't see like a retailer saying, "Oh, go buy a Dare,"
yeah,
like
yeah, exactly,
versus
yeah. Well, I
versus
mean,
ours.
some
So,
people do. I remember HubSpot had something about they wanted to rank for best CRM software,
yeah,
and
I
then that's what they
remember
did.
this.
They wrote a. This was a few years ago, right? They did a chart, a comparison chart, and they put themselves as number two behind some. I can't remember who the other company
Okay.
was, but then they ranked amongst they ranked really well for best CRM software.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so I mean, it's possible.
Yeah, I think that's possible. I think it's different also with like a smaller product that you're going to buy at like 20 or $30. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
CRM. I mean, that's like an involved process, right? But I think it would be really interesting if a smaller e-commerce retailer was like, go buy it here, and like, or go buy
Yeah,
something else somewhere, and someone could like this without even really thinking about it. But
yeah, yeah.
and again, I haven't really. I'm trying to think because I've been digging really deep with the latest PRU. I haven't come across any like that.
No, no, me
Yeah.
neither. I'm
So
just trying to think
yeah.
of how we could help.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
sure.
we're always brainstorming on
Yeah.
ideas.
But
I'm
that
thinking
is
of
an
another.
easier
Yeah,
path. That's an easier path than setting up an e-commerce site.
yeah,
Like if you're
yeah, yeah.
the
Exactly.
other way
Yeah.
around. So
Yeah, yeah. I do think there's some room though. I thought it was interesting how you said, if Google's kind of reserved so many spots for best of or affiliate type content, I think there's a lot of SERPs where that's missing. So maybe there's some opportunity there for people to write affiliate content if and review products, perhaps,
yeah,
perhaps.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I was going to
I did
mention
have
another.
another.
Oh, you go, you
Yeah,
go, you go ahead. Yeah.
I had another example, which is a site. This was actually rough to kind of to analyze. So I had a site contact me. It was outside of a Broadcore update. Out of nowhere, intense shift happens. They're kind of a leader in their niche, right? And they write. I can't get into too much detail about what they do, but let's just say if you were looking specifically for what they do, they should rank, and they always
Hmm.
did. Suddenly all these other sites started popping in, and they didn't really their focus is not on that, but they
Okay.
have content that
Okay.
now relates to that, and that was really tough for the site owner.
Hmm.
They were like, "This is wrong. We have been doing this forever. This is all we do." And I believe that they had brought it up to Google, so that probably got passed along to the teams that run it just to analyze what's going on. And I will tell you, it's probably 2 months maybe, and things definitely turned.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I'm not saying they're back to where they were,
Hmm.
but they rank a lot better for those terms than what they were. So it's almost like potentially the teams, and it can happen where they're like, yeah, this isn't right, and
Hmm.
it got through the proper channel and back to the team so they could review it, and then maybe they refine the algorithms. So again, it's not a full reversal, but they're doing a lot better than they were. So that's another intense shift that actually that curve comes back a bit
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
start to rank more for those queries again.
And you wonder how much of that came about because they brought it to Google. I mean, I
Correct.
do think Google, I mean,
Yeah.
Google's always trying to get good, relevant algorithms, and they know that it's not perfect. But then what happens is we get a lot of people that come to us and say, "Hey, Marie, can you just call John up and call John Mueller up and tell him
Right.
something's wrong with our site?" Right. And it doesn't always work that way.
No, no, no. And I mean, I forget the channel that they used. It might have been joining a Hangout, or maybe they pinged Danny Sullivan or whatever it was. But if like Danny's great that way too, and so is John. Where
Mhm.
if they see something that's weird, they'll pass it
Yeah.
along to the teams to look at, which is great. I mean, they,
Mhm.
like when you report feedback in the search results, supposedly that goes to a human. So,
Mhm.
they will look at things. So, and if something seems off, you can see that reverse sometimes. So,
Mhm.
um, unfortunately for the sites that are dealing with it, they're still down for that time, but hopefully that they can come back if it's truly something where the team goes, yeah, this isn't right. Other times
Mhm.
they may go, no, this is what we want.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if you remember the celebrity update. It was
Yeah. Yeah.
December,
Yeah.
whenever it was, years ago, and I saw
I
all of these
remember.
celebrities drop off the map, their own sites. And
Mhm.
Danny saw it and was like, I'm passing it along to the teams.
Yeah.
Nothing changed. Why? Because I looked at it. Yeah, those sites were terrible. They were like 4 pages for like, so I'm not going to
Mhm.
start naming stars here, but the right thing was to rank Instagram
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
their other profiles over their sites, because their sites hadn't been touched in years.
Yeah, and often that's something we'll see too. As a client will say, "Well, yes, we deserve to rank here better than anybody else." And then when we look at it, we're like, "Well, actually, these pages provide more information." Or, it's often hard to look at your own baby and see where the faults are sometimes. So that's
Right,
why
totally.
people like you and I are good for getting an opinion there.
Right. And
Um,
and not just our opinion, but it's our opinion based upon seeing a lot of different
yeah,
sites
yeah,
go through
exactly,
similar
yeah.
situations. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know what I worry about sometimes? Maybe I'm going to get too deep here. Is that I think we rely on each other so much, right? Like you'll publish stuff about here's what you're seeing, and then Lily Ray will publish, here's what she's seeing, and I'll say here's what I'm seeing, and then we try to connect that with each other and find the commonalities. And I wish there were more people who published what they're seeing. It's difficult for obvious reasons, right? Because the SEO community is very quick to criticize or to say, "Oh no, you're wrong in this and that." But I wish more people would say, "Oh, I had a site that was affected by this update, and I think it could be this." I wish we could have more discussion on that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And like you will probably agree, I mean, publishing content, first of all, is massively time consuming, especially
Hmm.
when you're doing analysis on top of writing, on top of editing, on top of grabbing screenshots and stuff. So I think there's that piece of it. And then
Yes.
there's the fear piece of, someone may think that they're going to write something and get hammered on Twitter for it or whatever. So yeah, I mean, the more that can be shared, the better. I think things are going probably in the opposite direction, unfortunately. I just
Hmm.
don't
Hmm.
see enough people writing about stuff like this,
I think most of it is
Yeah.
fear. I think it's fear
Yeah.
of being wrong because there's so much that's not provable right now in SEO that,
Yeah.
but we can still have theories. So anybody who's listening, if you like wanted to publish something or have some theories, you can reach out to me, and my Twitter DMs are open now. So you can reach out to me and I'll happily help you publish something if it'll help other people in the SEO community. Because that's what I think grows us, and we have all this fear that like maybe we'll follow the wrong direction, but we all mean well, we all are intending to help sites. So that's my little soapbox there, as I want to get more people
Right.
involved in sharing their stuff. Let's talk a little bit here about site quality problems. I mean, we could probably
Yes.
talk for hours on this, but
Sure.
tell me, some of the maybe common things that you would see.
Yeah, sure. So, and then I could give some quick examples as well. But so basically, if there's site quality problems, it could be a number of things, right? I always say there's not one smoking gun. Look at everything from content. Obviously, if you have thinner content, can't meet or exceed user expectations. User engagement to me is huge, right? So if you have
Hmm. Hmm.
a horrible UX that people can't get through, and you're really annoying them and they're leaving, Google can pick up on that in a number of ways. Related to that is aggressive advertising, right? So
Hmm.
in Google's blog post, which I know you read all the time about core updates, they literally say, is the page filled with ads, right? I mean, so this is something I've seen, and you probably have as well, since medieval Panda days, right? So really bad, aggressive advertising situation. It's totally okay to run ads. I'm not saying not to, but
And
when
it's
you
hard.
yeah,
Oh, sorry to interrupt you, Glenn. I wanted to say how hard it is to get rid of that problem, because when the site comes to you, they're struggling,
yeah,
and then you
right,
tell them get rid of your ads.
correct.
That's difficult, right?
I've spoken to many a monetization team, and sometimes those calls go really well, and sometimes they don't. And I totally get it. You're asking a site to be more aggressive in cutting down revenue, right? But it's really clear sometimes, and I've seen this a million times. I've written numerous posts about it as well, and included those in my posts about Broadcore updates. But you cannot do that, right? There was one the other day. I was counting. I literally counted. I think it was 40 ads on the page.
Oh gosh.
Right. I mean, it was
Wow.
like every other paragraph weaved into the content. And then there was one sticky one at the bottom. And on mobile, it was like taking up a third of the top and scrolling with you as you were going down the page. I mean,
That's
it's
not
just,
good.
yeah, don't do this, right? So you have the ad situation, then you have aggressive affiliate, which can be a problem as well. So we're talking about product reviews updates. So sites like that need to watch out for that. So, and then the last piece are technical SEO problems that cause quality problems. You have a glitch on your site, suddenly you're pumping out 10,000 pages without any content or broken content. That's not good either. I mean,
Right.
so
Right.
so all of this together falls under quality to me. And John Mueller even said quality is not just about content, right? He said it's about user experience. It's about how things are presented. It's about the ad situation. I have a great tweet that I shared, and I make sure I share that whenever anyone brings that up, because that's super important to understand. It's not just content.
And I think for a lot of people, the first step when a site has seen traffic drops is to jump straight to technical. And I mean, we've talked about that technical is. I find now, I mean, my team is doing a really good job on technical reviews, but the sites that see drops with core updates, if you had technical problems that were hindering your site, like you wouldn't have been ranking well to start with, it's just very rare that is the issue. Although, mind you, we can find things that we can fix that result in some improvements, but it's not going to result in a complete recovery from a core hit.
Right. Other than if the technical issues were causing content quality
Exactly.
issues,
Yeah. Good point.
But I agree with you. I mean, certain technical things are not going to impact you during a Broadcore update. But again, if you find something like, a client goes, wow, I didn't know those 300,000 pages were there. It's like, yeah, they were, and they're really not good. And Google crawled and indexed a portion of them, and then, good luck. So
yeah, that's a quote we use from John all the time too, where he said something about how every page that's in the index is considered when Google considers quality for your site.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I call it quality indexing. Focus on that. Make sure your highest quality content is indexed, and make sure thin and low quality content is not. Now, some people go overboard with that, and start cutting content that they shouldn't, but it's really important to understand that ratio. I've written a few posts about that as well.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so assuming that we've improved quality on a website, what's your experience in recovery? Like I know you can't say exactly what percentage of sites would recover, but what do you tend to see when you've helped a site fix quality issues?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The question I get every time from a company that I'm helping with Broadcore updates. So it really depends on the site, right? So let's face it. We know you really can't recover until another Broadcore update. Sure, there are smaller core updates. I actually have an example of that I might share in a minute, but where you could see improvements. But if you've been majorly impacted, you pretty much need another one for those algorithms to refresh and rerun.
And sometimes more than one. Sometimes more than one, I find too. Yeah.
Oh, you mean Broadcore updates?
Yeah.
Oh, totally. That's what I was just going to say. So like my point is, like, if you start making changes and you have a month before the next Broadcore update, you're not going to recover. And if you see some improvements, it's probably minor. But a lot of sites need to wait till that next one or even longer. I mean, some of the best improvements that I've seen with clients have happened a year down the line after. Now, these are huge sites making massive changes over time. Google's on record explaining that they want to see that significant improvement over the long term and see that in place. Why? Because if not, spammers could change, recover, spam again, right? I mean, so Google's like, no, we're going to be cautious. I think John's used that word with algorithms a lot. They're going to be a little more cautious with this site if they've seen a lot of this go on or that go on, or more critical, right? So you want to make sure that they're not as critical and they're not as cautious down the line. So I would say you're looking at, if it's a large scale site that's been impacted, probably 4 to 6 months, right?
I would agree.
And especially if things in place, not just you working on it, but Google crawling, reprocessing that and seeing that in place for 4 to 6 months. But some I've seen over a year. Now, the cool part of the ones that took a year, that stinks that it took a year, but they're in such good position now that they fixed so many things that they really don't have to worry nearly as much as they did in the past, because they know what we're doing is great. We're not messing around. We don't have thin or low quality content anymore. We're on top of quality indexing. Technical SEO is sound, so on and so forth. Our ad situation's not nuts anymore. And, they could feel better moving on. So.
Yeah. And it does take time. Definitely. Yeah. I think 4 to 6 months is a reasonable time frame for most of the sites that we work on too,
Sure.
assuming you're going to see recovery. And that's what we've been through as well. That, if the shifts were because the intent had shifted,
Right.
or relevancy was seen as different,
Yep.
then you may not see recovery from that.
Totally. And also on
Yeah.
that note, it's it's really important to understand that if you cherry pick changes, you may never recover. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
to clearly get out of the gray area. And the
Yeah.
worst part, and I always said it's maddening for site owners, if you are making changes and you're getting close to getting out of the gray area, but not enough, you will never know how close you are.
Mm-hmm.
You'll
Mm-hmm.
just stay down. And
Yep.
that I've seen site owners do that, and it's terrible. One in particular was a news publisher a few years ago, destroyed during a Broadcore update, wouldn't change certain things that were big. Not one smoking gun, but it was a big gun that they had going
Mm-hmm.
on there, and they would not fix it, and they flatlined for 2 full years.
Wow.
Then fixed it, and during the next Broadcore update, they came back, not fully back,
Wow.
but up a
Yeah. Yeah.
lot. And it's like you could have done that then. Do you know what I mean? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
my point is just make as many changes as you can to objectively improve the site. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't do that, there's a chance that you could just remain down, and that's maddening.
Yeah. And that's kind of what you've called the kitchen sink approach, right?
Yes, exactly.
Is do all that you can,
Correct.
anything. And that's our approach as well, is to work on anything that we can find that we can say, right, well, this could be something that could improve quality. And then the tricky part is in prioritizing it and
Definitely.
determining what to work on, because sometimes you can't do absolutely everything.
Right. Yeah, the kitchen sink is really important, because I love the tweet from Fabrice Cannell from Bing, because they're very transparent about the use of
Yes.
machine learning.
Uh-huh.
And the video was, we send thousands of signals to the machine learning system. It determines weighting and then ultimately rankings. An
Wow.
engineer can't go in and know what is more powerful than another thing with these signals. And he said thousands of signals. So the idea that you could tweak 20 things, 50 things, or even 100 things, right? And say, well, this is it. That's not the way I'm looking at it. And that's not the way Google's algorithms and Bing's algorithms are looking at it either. So I love that video.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we should just buy links then. Fix it all with links.
Yeah,
No?
right. Yeah, well, I mean, I explained this in my December product reviews update post. I mean, there were some companies that surged through the roof with a handful of links. I mean, they were going against behemoths, and they had 7,000 links.
Interesting.
One had like, I think 3,000 links, but they were good links. But they were only 3,000, surged through the roof. So it's definitely not all about links. Links are hugely important, don't get me wrong, but they're not the end all. And you can see that,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot to know. I think this has been a really, really good discussion. I think this is probably a good place to end it. Unless, did you have any other examples or anything you wanted to share?
No, I mean, I had some examples of quality problems, but I mean, we kind of covered, like what those things would be. I could probably talk further. Maybe we could do another podcast where we go deeper with those. But
you know what I want to talk to you about, Glenn? Although I was gonna, here I am mentioning it. But I didn't prep you for this at all. So,
okay.
Is Phantom updates back 2015, Rank Brain, and all, because that was when, Google gave us the Panda questions with Panda in 2011. And then 2015, I feel, with Rank Brain was when they actually started to be able to assess some of these things algorithmically. And I have all sorts of theories on what happened and what changed there. I'm in the midst of putting together a presentation for SMX on that. And I think when that comes out, I'm going to want to do some more talk on podcast about my thoughts on how Google's use of entities is connected to answering some of these questions in the product review updates posts and things like that. So at some point, I want to chat with you again and get your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Phantom, that was a long time ago. And just so people understand, Google did not name that Phantom. I called it Phantom just because it was a mysterious update, and everyone was like, name. Google Phantom updates. But it was a good name. It was basically, in my opinion, just Broadcore updates before they started telling us they were Broadcore updates, because they were massive updates that it was hard to ignore
Mhm.
what was going on. So I'm glad they finally started telling us when they're pushing these
Yeah.
massive updates. So
Yeah, so much has gone on in the last decade of search. Gosh, well, thank you for doing this, Glenn. This has been really, really good. What are you up to? Anything interesting for the summer? You're a big baseball fan, right? You're a
yeah, exactly.
Yankees
The
fan.
so the baseball season started late due to the issues that they were having, but they're back and the Yankees look good. But the American League East is tough with the Blue
Yeah,
Jays.
I
Then
hear.
they're
I
playing.
so I was a big Jays fan, and I haven't watched a lot of baseball recently, but I heard the Jays have a good team this year.
They have a really good team, but in the division, you have the Red Sox, the Jays, the Yankees, the Rays. There, so 4 out of the
Hmm.
5 teams are excellent. So it should be interesting.
Oh,
So that, and my kids are heavily involved in sports and stuff. So yeah, we'll be watching a lot of that.
fun, fun. Well, Glenn, if people want to, are you taking new client work right now? If people want to reach
Um,
out to you,
Yeah, I
or you're
mean,
busy.
people could absolutely reach out to me. There's usually a bit of a wait, but it depends on the time of year and everything like that. So yeah, but if anyone ever has any questions about what's going on, they could absolutely ping me on Twitter, or go to my website and email me from there.
Excellent. We'll make sure we have Glenn's Twitter account on the show description there, so you can, so anybody can reach you there. If anybody wants to reach me or hire our team, you can reach us at help@mariehaynes.com. And I'm on Twitter at Marie_Haynes. I kind of made it part of my job. I loved tweeting so much, so I hired a bunch of people, and they do most of the grunt work while I get to learn and tweet things. So everybody's welcome to tweet at me if you have questions that I can help you with. And I think we're through. So thanks, Glenn. This was fantastic.
Yeah, no,
And
this was a great conversation. Lots to cover.
yeah, we'll have to do it again soon. So thanks
Definitely.
everybody for listening, and I wish you the best of luck with your rankings.